La Lanterna, a spotlight in Italian football, is a podcast that dives into the beautiful game seen from the eyes of two fans from the oldest team in Italy's point of view. My name is Fabrizio Cardone, Canadian and Genovese, together with my friend Matt Killen, an American-born and Genoa fan. Every week, we'll tell you all you need to know about the only team you need to know about, Genoa CFC. Plus, we'll have guests and provide updates from around the magical world of Italian football. Benvenuti, everyone. This is La Lanterna podcast with Fabrizio and my best friend, Matt. How are you, Matt?
Fabrizio, ciao, doing well. How are you?
I am good. And so should we start by saying that we're happy? Should we start by saying we're concerned? Or should we start by saying end of transfer market, we're all excited? Or let's analyze about that one.
Man, I don't know. I feel like it's like a mix of those things. Like I feel a bit of antipathy, to use a big word, I suppose, on our last match. But I also think if you look at the transfer market and you look at our form, the players the positions where we had specific needs, did we sign players there? We did. Is our overall form in keeping with where we would want it to be? I think overall, yeah, it is. So, we have a tough battle coming up, but I also think there's reasons for optimism, as much as I was pretty pissed off at the last game, to be honest with you. So
no, I do recall your comments, chat wise on your actual mood. I may say, not necessarily the words, but I could.
The volume of messages, it usually tells you something about how a person's feeling about something.
Yeah, and the choice of words as well, right?
Fair enough.
But okay, so let's start by saying Serie B match day 22.
Yes.
It was quite an exciting match from some aspects and a little less, at least from our aspects. Also mainly because the fact that we were expecting a win. So final result at Marassi, we had Genoa versus Pisa.
Yeah.
So that was the third ranked in last season's Serie B. Let's don't forget that lost against Monza. So they did not make it to the Serie A last year. But we remember from the first leg, it was like quite the interesting match. We did play not well. We ended up winning, but throughout the season, we saw this Pisa going down with that Maran that we kind of all remember who that is, right? So exactly. Pisa kind of probably can agree with us with respects to how what they feel, what they think about Maran. Mm-hmm. In fact, once they got rid of Maran and D'Angelo, which got sacked, and then they called him back, honestly, I guess that's the first thing I'm going to ask you. What did you think about how D'Angelo set Pisa's squad against Genoa?
Well, the match, I think the comment on the group chats was right, and you could sort of see it in how they were playing the game. They weren't necessarily out there for the points. I guess you could say it that way. They were defensive. I think you could call it a little bit negative, but I honestly, I don't mind those tactics from a manager. I think in a position like Pisa are in, a point is a very good result for them. It's honestly, at the end of the day, like you and I were talking, it's not a bad result for us per se. But I thought overall their approach to the match was very much more cautious, a little bit more defensive. They were compact. They were well organized. They understood what they were doing. You could see those things. Fortunately for Genoa, it didn't really set up for a ton of engaging play, and it seemed like we maybe missed some opportunities to really make something of the match. But overall, a little bit more of a defensive type of an approach from Pisa, it seemed.
So it was a scoreless draw, 0-0. Pisa came at Marassi like almost every other team that came to Marassi as if they were the Barcelona of the situation. And I'm saying that because a lot of fans from the Genoa perspective are always forgetting, like we always want to win, obviously, right?
Yeah.
We always want to win, especially at home against our own team. By the way, amazing turnout on the fan.
We have to talk about this. This was incredible at the match.
An amazing turnout from the fan base, and that's also thanks to the numbers that came from Pisa. I think in the rounds of 30,000 for the Marassi, that's almost sold out.
Yep.
And it was a beautiful spectacle. Pisa is not a gemellaggio with Genoa, but there is as Will said in our last podcast, there is a friendship and respect among the two, especially because of the past, with respects to the fact of Signorini being shared among the two, our former captain from the 90s and whatnot. And so there's this respect between the two. Nevertheless, 30,000 turnout on the fan base. I saw a lot of videos and about the match with respects on the side, on the what would you call it, from the fan base. Mm-hmm. So it was beautiful. I could hear even them. So it was, in a way, even though Will was saying, let's try to get the most tickets as possible because that we want to hear more of us rather than them. But it's still nice to hear. And I don't want to mention like derbies and so on, but one of the part of the derby when we play against the bikers is the fact that you have a chant from both sides, right? So right. Having had at least 4,000 coming from Pisa, it was wonderful. On top of the fact that they had like a quarter of the Gradinata Sud, mm-hmm. So plus the section, the sector for the guests and whatnot. So it was just like a beautiful experience, at least from a fan base.
Yeah, I mean, you could kind of get a sense there too that wasn't like a really hostile environment for the Pisa fans, and I thought it was pretty impressive to see that the number of Genoa fans in the Gradinata Sud. And I know we've had this, throughout the year, we've kind of had this whole campaign where we're sort of taking over the Gradinata Sud and we're making it another place for our fans to experience kind of the Nord if you're not in the Nord, or making a second Nord or whatever. But it really looked like we did a pretty damn good job of that in this game. Like it was damn near sold out if it wasn't. And you could definitely kind of tell and hear the environment that was there. And not to mention, of course, like there was a little bit as well with Bresh being there and Guasto d'Amore and that video being shot, I think, on the weekend after the game, which is pretty cool.
So let's talk a little bit about that, because not necessarily all our listeners have known about it. So first of all, I want to say for the non-Italian or non-European type of listeners, when we talk about opponents coming into the stadium, it's not like at least I'm going to speak it with respect to the North American sports and whatnot, where you get a mix of all sides and whatnot. And sure. It's like a very and you can actually speak more about it rather than me, but it's very family orientated. It's not dangerous.
Come on, North America. Yeah.
Sure. It's like people go to the stadium, and even if you beside me are rooting for the other team, who cares, kind of thing. In Europe, in Italy, it's not necessarily, and I'm going to quote on that, like underline it and bold it, not necessarily the case. And what I mean by that is, like if you look at other matches against the next one coming up, for example, or Ternana or Verona, which are like Juventus or Milan, like these are all like teams that are not our friends. And what I mean by our friends, and I'm doing quotation mark, is because from a fan base, they're not friends. That's why we use a word with a Pisa where there's a friendship.
Right.
So in what that means is, that's the sad and the downside, or interesting but not interesting side of the soccer in Italy, culture in Italy, where there is a lot of, unfriendship. So there's a lot of, back and forth of words are flying, mm-hmm. stuff like that.
Yeah.
But which is okay because it's two different teams that are opponents. But when you start to have like, fights or hands or punching or kicking each other or starting to be a little bit going to the hospital or even dying, it might not be so nice anymore. So when we say about friendly, that means that it's a great atmosphere. When there are matches that there is not, and sometimes there are situations where they actually do not accept the guests to come into the city.
Yep.
And those are situations where the fan bases are so strongly against each other that it's unfortunately still like that hooliganism that is or hooligans that is referred to in the media, where unfortunately in Europe it's still it still exists, while in North America we don't even know what that means.
Yeah, I mean it's I can't speak to it also like less credibly, I suppose, because I've been to a single solitary match, and the one that I went to I think was very much an intentional kind of unifying moment. And also I don't believe we have a real mortal enemy with Bologna in the match that I had attended. In that case, they're kind of neither Genoa nor
the only nemesis, I may say, stems from the olden days when there were like the Scudettos era.
Yes,
where they
in the
kind of like,
were we talking about like in the 1910s that we're talking about?
Yeah. Other than
Pre
that,
Mussolini days, got it. Pre Sampdoria days, okay.
exactly.
But anyway, I understand though there's a difference there, and I think this is one of those things when you're a fan and you're, I guess without saying it maybe in a perfect way, like as a foreigner being a fan of a club like Genoa, like this is something it's always hard for foreigners to like really totally understand. I definitely think in North America there is certainly you see violence, unfortunately, in our sports as well. There are fans that get hurt, there are fans that get berated. There's a lot of stuff that happens in that it's not necessarily like relatively common, but it is to a degree that much. But by understand, I mean like the way that the relationships are carried and how those things show up in an actual match. I think it's something that you kind of need to understand that context and that culture a little bit. And obviously it's not something that necessarily you want to say there's an excusable reason or X, Y, and Z. But anyway, the point being was with Pisa, I think there was more of an openness for a number of reasons. And I think to your point, there's a little bit of the Signorini love kind of helps with both of those things because of that. And I think there's a mutual respect amongst the clubs. I also think generally,
I like that.
We don't normally get pitted against each other all that often as well. It's not like we've had many memories of having to beat Pisa in order to get X, and likewise for them. So it just, I think it made for a really nice match day on the whole. You had a wonderfully packed Marassi, which is always a sight to see. And generally we've been doing a good job of that. But it seemed especially so for this match, and partially maybe because of the tie. So it was great to see all that stuff.
So going into the match, the expectations were high. We even heard it from our last episode with Will that we needed to make points. Points were not necessarily made because we're still we made 1 point, which is still important.
Yeah.
You were saying, sorry.
No, we got a point, right? But we didn't get 3 points, which we were wrong.
But nevertheless, we were looking also upwards and downwards. So Regina lost. We already knew that. So we were 1 point above Regina. We're now in solitude to the second spot. So if Serie B finished, you don't make life about ifs and buts, right? But if Serie B if Serie B ended today, we would have the straight promotion.
Yeah.
Nevertheless, we were looking up at Frosinone. I remember the episode straightly from last episode saying, Benevento, you have a job. and they didn't.
Job was not met. No.
Job was not met, even though they did only. I'm continuously hearing, I didn't see the match. I don't know if you watched the match, Matt, but I continuously hear about Frosinone winning dirty, meaning the match was not great. They played awfully, but yet they are able to have that the edge above the former squad. I'm not too sure if you saw the match.
I didn't see the match. I'm going to induce a bunch of eye rolls from our listeners in saying this, but you usually hear that stuff about teams that win. And a famous old example and a terrible comparison is the Manchester United sides of the Ferguson era would famously win this way all the time. They'd be seemingly lackluster, and all of a sudden they get a goal late in the game, or they get a foul that maybe shouldn't have happened, and they take advantage of it and they score and they go on.
So what are you trying to say? What are you trying to say?
Frosinone are not winning the treble, okay? But I think at the end of the day, they're a side that are competitive and they're winning. And I've heard similar complaints as well about them kind of having these wins that somewhat seem unimpressive and or fortunate. But at the end of the day, you have to look at their form, and it's incredible. I mean, they've been on just this crazy run. It would be wonderful to see that upended and see that momentum slowed, but we've been talking now for 22 consecutive games almost, or match days almost, that this is going to happen, and it's not happened yet, and they're still 8 points clear.
So based on what you just said, Matt, it's very interesting because for us, everything is net new. Like for us, Serie B, last time we were in Serie B was like 12, 13 years ago. And things have drastically changed since then. However, even though we know, and we always known that Serie B was a super competitive league. And having said that, I'm repeating again for whomever is listening from the outside, Serie A is not only the only league to follow, because Serie B is being so competitive. It's actually more interesting than many more leagues out there. A little bit from the EPL perspective, where you get a lot of more competitiveness type of thing. So having said that, I always reach out to Raffaello, our friend from Cosenza, right? He's a great guy. And I always will continue. He's great friendship also among the fan base, right? So we're talking, we're messaging to each other. We didn't really talk to each other.
Yeah.
But we were talking about lasagna. We were talking about the transfer market right after. But then he says,
Kevin Lasagna, just to be clear for our listeners, we're talking not about food, but
not about the lasagna, but the actual exactly the player from Verona. Anyways, gotta love that. Eddie was like so having fun about that one. But anyways, so he said to me specific words from Raffaello, Cosenza fan, Cosenza Club New York, president and whatnot. But he was saying to me, Italians, I'm doing a little translation right off the bat. You will see the second leg, how it's going to turn out.
He said the same thing to me. We were messaging. I think we both were talking to him. It's like, the new second leg is starting right now.
That's what he said. He says it's going to be a new league.
Yeah.
I was like, what the? So I shared with him something else that I'm going to say right soon after about another conversation from another former guest, Jake from Città Calcio USA. And so he says, there's going to be a lot of nice surprises on the top and the bottom. That's his words. He says, like, what do you mean? He's like, the difference are going to be straightforward. You will have Cagliari that is going to resuscitate. Then he says, you guys as well. Bari and Palermo are going. So basically, he's saying Cagliari and Genoa are going to be the top two, because Cagliari is going to resuscitate. This is his prediction.
Well, by the way, Cagliari not that far. I mean, Cagliari, the difference between us and them and us and Frosinone is the same amount as 8 points gap right now between the two. Just for saying aloud,
it's still what.
If we have plenty of season to play to that point.
You know what I mean? Exactly. So he says Bari and Palermo are going to fight for the third spot. Bari and Palermo.
Interesting. Okay.
Everything is already written, he says. That's amazing. He's a great guy. Regina is going to fall like crazy. And
mind you, this is coming from a Cosenza fan, so there might be, I would have said the same thing about Sampdoria.
a little bias. That's true.
I don't mind that, by the way. I like that predict.
And he said,
I must recuse myself from any of the predictions because of my
No, that's true. It's like you'll see that a lot of teams that are now fighting for relegation in Serie B are going to reach the playoffs, and the same for the opposite. So whomever might be fighting for playoffs right now might be fighting for playouts afterwards.
I still think, though, I mean, you have to say, like, you look at the table, and okay, sure, maybe the gap is fairly large, but like, listen, it's not that large. Like, Cosenza right now are at the bottom of the table. Cosenza are on 21 points. Pisa are the last spot in I think the kind of play-in places. They're on 31 points. It's a 10-point gap. Now, that would be a big swing of results, but basically you need Cosenza to win 3 and draw 1 and Pisa to do the opposite. And I guess the goal difference stuff has to kind of work itself out.
I mean, obviously he was like coloring a little bit, right? But nevertheless, he doesn't like, okay.
But it's in the realm of, the point is it's in the realm of possibility, right? Like that's not absolutely insane. Over the course of the next second half, that's not absolutely out of the question that something like that doesn't happen.
So that's exactly the question, that the conversation I had with Jake, another of our former from Città Calcio USA. Cittadella, exactly. So he was saying to me, we were looking at the bottom. So while Rafa was more talking about the top, about who might be coming up and whatnot, then with Jake, we were more talking about the bottom. So he's comparing not only the previous season of Serie B, not only that, but also the Serie A. So we're looking at our freaking ciclisti, the bikers, that are at 9 points with 8 goals in 19 matches. 8. Okay. With 9. Gotta love that laugh, right? But 9 points. Okay. In Serie A, while we're looking at the bottom 3, bottom 4 or 5, the ones that are like the 3 good, they go straight down plus the 2 for playouts, they're already above 20, Matt. We're half season through. While in Serie A with 40 points, you're like,
but
totally like,
that is 100% wholly the point, though, and also like of course the qualification. There's no play-in for Serie A really in the same way, so like you don't have as many teams that can be in that number, to potentially go up or whatever. But still, if you look at Verona in 18th place with 13 points, it's a 24-point gap between them and Roma. There's no way that Verona at 13 points is going to catch Roma's 37 points by the end of the season and all of a sudden have a chance to qualify for the Europa Conference League. But when you look at, 9 points, anything can happen in that situation. And 9 points for Sampdoria, it feels that much bigger because Sampdoria are trying to go 2 places and they have 9-point gap. And to your point, their opponent in that position, Spezia, have scored many more goals and also have secret agent Eldor on board.
Secret agent, I love that.
To make sure that Spezia does the job and do stay well above Sampdoria. And keep
so for who hasn't followed the transfer market for Serie A, we have to say that our former Genoa player Eldor Shumordov, which was called the Messi from, I can't name.
I want to say Kazakhstan, but that's wrong.
No, it's wrong. Anyways, he was like our former player.
How do I not know this?
I can't remember. Like sometimes when we're talking, I continue. I get these like empties.
Uzbek. He's Uzbekistan.
Uzbekistan. That's right. So he went to. We sold him to Roma. Obviously, we have the one Mourinho that doesn't even know who he is. So he's not even using him. So
I think you're right. I don't think he knows his first name, even though it's on the back of his shirt.
For sure he does. Anyways, so he gets loaned out, straight loan, mind you, only for 6 months to La Spezia. So hence your comment about I know La Spezia.
But in this case, we're rooting for
That's the armpit of Italy. You know what I mean?
Yes, it is. Only worst place in Italy is the Doriano part of Genoa.
Well, they don't have a city.
That's true.
So that's okay.
That's true. Even Principe, those parts of the city, that's not.
And we don't even know if they're going to be.
There's Genoano everywhere in Genoa.
Yeah, they're not going to be enrolled in any type of major competition in the next few little while. I'm going to say that, knock on wood. We don't know. Anyways,
we have to. Well, I'll park that conversation for later. But
that's called karma. But we'll keep that for the end of the season.
Yes.
Exactly. So going back, we're like going all over the place, but it's an interesting type of episode actually. So a draw with Pisa.
Yeah.
Pisa came to Genova at Amarasi, great spectacle from the fan side, but they came with an amazing show from however they played. Actually, I'm gonna you know how I always say, like, I throw a curveball and whatnot, but I'm going to throw it actually at the first half of the episode by saying we're expecting, anyway, as always, we should be expecting a team that comes over and does their Barcelona as an example.
Yeah, we're going to get the team's best shot, of course. Yeah.
Right? Okay. So having said that, on top of that, we're getting like the team that is trying to do their best and whatnot, as I mentioned, but then there's a red card. So we didn't like digress deeply into the specifics of the match because it ended 2-0. So it's not that there's much to say besides the fact of that missed goal that we're going to talk about in a second, but hold off on that one first.
Yep.
But we get a red card specifically at, let me see here,
68th minute, I want to say
60th,
68th, I think.
68. Okay.
Yes.
68 minutes. So we have at least half an hour. Okay. On our hands to basically to be one man up. I think that even though up until then it was quite balanced, where chances were coming very little from both sides, but yet it was almost, even though we had the ball possession, it was still like no one had the edge, let's say. But since the red card,
yeah,
I think it came to our disadvantage. That's my curveball I'm throwing to you.
Do you think we were playing too we took it for granted too much? Like we didn't really we definitely didn't make as much out of that opportunity. Of course not. We ended in a 0-0 draw.
No, what I'm trying to say is, even though we were one man up, even though after the red card, it seemed to be Genoa more on the offensive side, it seemed also, so that's my curveball to say to you, that Pisa had the opportunity to get themselves into act on the defensive side. So they put themselves doubled up on every ball, doubled and tripled, to annul totally our offensive.
I don't think you're wrong about that. I mean, obviously, when that happens, they were already. I would argue, actually, generally, they were already playing a similar style beforehand, but they obviously fully committed to that once they have Marin go down. We were talking about Moran before. Marin, their Romanian player, gets sent off. And now they're down to 10 men. And the only possible scenario, if you're managing Pisa at that moment, is we have to get out of here with a point. And so that means we are pulling back everything we can. And we are just going to basically park the bus, for lack of a better phrase, to try to get something out of the match. And I can understand that curve. I get what you're saying. I get your point in that ultimately that actually kind of was a counterfactor for us, because it totally took the gamesmanship out of it from Pisa's standpoint. If you're Pisa, the only possible result that you think you're going to be able to get is 1 point, and they did get that.
They did.
I think a lot of fans were a little bit disappointed, maybe for the first time with Gila's tactics, and in this one, I guess I'll say honestly, when I saw the team sheet to start out. And specifically, I think the complaints were this was a match. You heard it if you were listening to the English broadcast of the game. The guys they would not shut up about this, which was kind of annoying. It is the first time we ever had a match where we didn't have a quote unquote creative player on the pitch in the midfield side of things. So there was no Goodmanson, there was no Aramu, and I think a lot of people, you can pretty easily say, posthumously looking at the match, why did we not start the match with those players? Maybe moreover, why did we not at least start the second half with one of those two players so we had a little bit of spark or a little bit of link?
That's a different topic.
You think
altogether? So? No, you're absolutely right. I was going to get there in a second. So all I wanted to say, and I'm going to close this topic anyways, this portion of it anyways, by saying that I think the red card was not necessarily a godsend for us. Usually you say you get a red card and it's a great thing and so on, but what I'm trying to say is like essentially not necessarily it's a good thing. In this case, from a Pisa perspective, it was great for them because they planned the match in a way to get the point. And with the red card, they even made it more obvious. Like, we still had a lot of chance. A lot. They had still chances up front with 11 against 11. But once they got the red card, that was it. It was over.
They weren't playing football anymore after that point.
But super organized and so on. However, I do have to comment on the one chance that we had with Coda. This was still again when we had 11 against 11. So Coda, that was right there in the box. And what happens? And right after this small commentary we're going to get in in a few seconds, I want to say that we're going to comment about why two forwards. And here we go.
Coda! Puskas puts it over the bar. There was a handball. What a mix-up from the Genoa attack. That was a close one on Strootman. Expected Coda to score there. And then Puskas got in his way as he attempted to put it into the undefended net.
So essentially, that's my point, what I'm trying to say to you. A lot of people in our chats and whatnot, they all complain about having this formation, and hence this confusion. They're up front, to your point that you did like a few minutes ago, where we had like a 3-5-2 with two strikers with the exact identical quality. Hence, Coda right there, great chance, probably the best chance of the whole entire match, that kicks it and it goes straight up against Puskas, which is not his fault, mind you, but they're both identical players.
Yeah, I mean, part of what I wanted to say earlier too is like when I initially saw the starting lineup, I actually wasn't so fussed about it. I know a lot of people were, and I think when you watch the match, and again, like the commentators would not fucking let this thing go the entire game. But look, I'm going to use a bad example again. Then maybe we'll get some eye rolls from our listeners. But a Liverpool side might run a similar kind of 3-5-2 to something like this, and it's sometimes in these formations you see actually three more or less defensive midfield players that are responsible for having the cover while you have your fullbacks playing farther and more advanced positions, and you're kind of a little bit more relying on those kind of wingback, kind of left wingback, right wingback positions, if you want to call them that, on the outside of the midfield to do more of the creativity and to
hefty and crescito.
Exactly. And I think obviously in this match, of course, we talked about it in our last podcast. We did not have, unfortunately, Sibeli in this one. He was not available. And I will say, while some people did make a comment that, we really were missing Sibeli in this match, I did think Hefty did some positive things. And I thought he was pretty involved, especially in the first half, and coming in and making some connecting play and things like that. But, you think possibly, Strootman every once in a while plays in something nice. Badel, by the way, remember the first game of the season against Venezia, that wonderful ball Badel put in? It's not like these guys are not capable of putting in a great ball. But we just had three, you had Frendrup, who's kind of just like an engine type of a guy. And then you had really, really old Badel and really, really old Strootman next to each other. And both of those guys in their heyday were fantastic, but they're also, it kind of feels like we're missing the spark. And I think when you watch the match itself,
The
that's exactly
caveman.
what it felt like. Caveman. I know. I love that. I love that about Strootman.
What are you gonna What are you gonna say about Badel? If Strootman is the caveman, who is Badel?
I don't know. Neanderthal, I guess. I don't know what to say. I'm not a Badel hater though. I really am not. Like
No, neither am I.
um,
I actually really like this comment that I heard from one of the guys from Genoa si Resta on one of the pods that they do with whomever, and he said Badel actually, which is not necessarily a good thing, what I'm about to say, but he's not necessarily over. A lot of people are saying that he's done, it's over,
I
etc.
completely agree with that. Yes.
However, he might not be this great player for Serie B, but I think he still has something for Serie A.
Interesting. Yeah, I mean, obviously he's a player that has that experience, of course, in Serie A.
Yeah.
Been there for many years. I mean, I think so you talked a little bit at the beginning of this one about my gripes, and I think the frustrating thing with this as a fan is kind of like, all right, when you look at it objectively, all things considered, it's not the worst result. We ended up actually moving up a position as a result of the draw because Regina lost. We were playing a team that also is competitive and it's in the
I
right
agree
now.
Sorry, just a small thing. I still think they will be definitely part of the playoffs. No question.
Oh yeah. Well, right now they're in that last position, and
they'll stay there.
Of course, this was a team that was a game away against Monza from. Well, I guess it was a two-leg thing, but they were almost in Serie A last season. So this is talked about this at the beginning of the season. Like this is a team that you're always circling and saying this is going to be a difficult match. So getting a nil-nil draw against a team like Pisa objectively is not a terrible result. But I think for many Genoa fans, what the frustrating thing with this, and what I was frustrated about as well. So of course you have the missed opportunity. You're going 11 on 10 at home. You don't get anything for it. You see your opponent directly above you drop 3 points, and you don't have the opportunity to bridge that gap. Had we gotten 3 points again, like you consider a 6-point gap with Frosinone, if we happen to get a result against them, that perhaps makes it a 3-point gap, and then all of a sudden it's really on for like winning the league, which I think still there's as to your point earlier, there's a whole season to be played now. The second part of Serie B.
We're only at match day 22, so it's only the third match into second leg.
Yeah. So there's a whole kind of range of games to be played. But I think like for me, the frustrating thing watching this match, the chances were few and far between, but we just looked poor, I think is really what it comes down to. When it comes our attacking kind of either from our forwards putting a good shot on goal, or from any of the technical play that links up to that, we didn't really have that spark. And I think from an attacking perspective, we did not look, quote unquote, on the pace. And the thing that I need to maybe stop doing so much is when you watch a game like this, and what I was reacting to, what you saw in my chats, is when you kind of fast forward and look towards how the season could end, it makes it feel like we have a lot of work to do still. And
having said that, sorry, we'll get to that, but I apologize for interrupting. But we do have as we have now for the last few episodes, we do have an audio commentary from our former guest Will, who gives us a recap of the match from his point of view, from the being a Gradinata Nord hardcore member.
So about yesterday's game. Golden point, because I think last year you would eventually lost a game like that. Pisa has been a good team. They came here with a great defense. The first 10 to 15 minutes, they had their chances. We didn't play well at all. Gila, in my opinion, is I didn't like it how we started the first team, the first squad were not up to the game. I didn't like this 3-2 squad formation, and if you had started the game with at least one between Aram and Goodmanson, I don't know if you would have won, but we would have played so much better because Koda and Puskas, they were isolated. They didn't play well between them. They step on each other's foot, and you saw that when we missed that big occasion that basically Puskas has parried to Koda. As always, we have not been as cynical, and yeah, but I take the point and out to Parma to grab the win. Really important that we're second on our own, but we have to do better. And yesterday, Gila has wronged us to propose a 3-5-2 without quality.
So definitely thanks to Will for your comments on fresh comments, because his comment actually came the day after from the match. But Matt, coming back to your comments that you were talking about, you were saying that.
Well, I think you look at it on the whole, and we need to improve in some sort of way, you know. And look, again, we've seen incredible progress under Gilardino. We're under a great run of form on the whole. In our last 5 matches, we've won 4 and drawn 1, so not so bad. We've not yet dropped 3 points, and knock on wood, with Gilardino as our manager. So it's just one of those things where when you see the match and you watch the game, you really hope for more, and you hope that there's more togetherness in there. And I want to believe that this is a match we can write off as kind of like the Ascoli match from a month ago or so, which was sort of similar, although obviously a little bit different, where we're away from home. It's only Gila's second match, and they also don't get sent down to 10 men and whatever. But, we kind of at the time wrote that one off. I think we probably are best served to do the same against Pisa. But it does still feel like there's some things we need to address. And at least hopefully, we've seen also some movement in the transfer market. Maybe there's some other things that we'll see that are a little bit different to how the squad is put together.
This is like an infinite episode, because I could talk about gazillion things.
Yeah, absolutely.
Let's say from Gilardino's arrival, to your point, we have had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 wins, 2 ties. And I'm not going to consider the loss against Roma because
I agree. I wasn't even, yes, right.
We can even say that.
By the way, had we had won, could you imagine playing Ballardini in the Coppa Italia?
So let's say that. So we did lose 1-0 against Roma. It was only extremely, and no one can say anything above it for the fact of if
it's a great goal.
La Gioia, which is what's his face? Anyways, that Dybala that came in and hadn't done that goal, we would have went to the extra time, and God knows what would have happened. Yeah. And then what actually happened after that is Roma played against Cremonese. Cremonese, the last, even worse up until now, mind you. Worse than the Bikers.
Yeah.
But now, under this, the hands, the God amazingly hands of Mr. Zio Ballardini. Or Zio Balla.
Zio Balla. Uncle Ballardini.
They won against, not only have sent Napoli
before this,
but now Roma.
Yeah.
So, having said that, what I was trying to say is like going back to Gilardino's spell. So the loss against Roma, it was at point, like if you look at the boxing, it was at points. They only won because of that goal, because of
ridiculous goal from Dybala.
Ridiculous in a sense of amazing spell. I don't know, like this outclass. Like he's just like an amazing goal. Otherwise, it was equal, 100% equal.
Yeah, it was a good game. We did well.
Going back to Serie B, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 matches under
Gilardino.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So 8
8
7
total.
matches.
7 in Serie B. Yeah.
7 matches, 5 wins and 2 ties. I'm sorry, but nobody has done better than that.
Yeah. And the ties we had were against 2 decent sides. I think you have to say too. Ascoli is not a bad side.
It's a tough side.
Even though they're mid-table, they're still a tough team and almost equal on their goal difference as well. So
we had, to your point, we had Südtirol, 4th, Frosinone, 1st, Bari, contender for the 3rd spot up here. Venezia, what the fuck are they doing at the bottom? Benevento, we won. Who cares? Doesn't matter. Pisa, former 3rd, last, and whatever, and so on. And still, I don't understand how they lost to Perugia and anyways, their last form of the last 2 matches before us, because they're doing very, very super well.
Yeah.
How are we to complain here?
I think in the end, I sympathize, and you get this too, because you know that I was saying this. I sympathize with people who are upset after the match, because you do want to see progress, and you do want to see a more. It wasn't like the players were disinterested. I don't think it was that type of a thing. Sometimes you watch matches and it's just
not at all.
It wasn't that. It just was something where it felt like we were off and we didn't look like a team that really looked like where we should be. And of course, it was an opportunity to gain 3 points, and especially with them going down a player. So, and it also, you compound it by the fact that we did have good chances, and they were almost like, they were pretty terribly missed. I think you have to say it. They were bad misses. But look, we are still in a good position, and now we must look forward, because that's the only thing we can do. And
listen, we're still alone 2nd spot.
We're alone in 2nd spot by a point, but we have an important match against the Parma side that need to get back into these playoff places, and is going to really take this match seriously, of course. So I think this weekend's match is going to be an incredibly critical one to Genoa's. And we talked about this, we were playing, when you look at the run coming back into, after our match against Roma in the Coppa Italia, Venezia, okay, they're down in the table, but this was a team that was with us in Serie A last season. Again,
exactly.
maybe much changed team, but still a lot of quality players on that team. Benevento, a team that some people were saying might be able to make its way up to.
Hey, listen, they were in the top list of whatever that list was with respects to last season anyways, like not saying at the pars of Pisa, but still they were up there, right?
Oh, totally. And then you have Pisa, of course, we just talked about. We have Parma next, who I think odds-on favorites is kind of us, Parma, and Cagliari at the beginning of the season. And then we have Palermo, who are always a difficult out, even if we're playing them at home. And so if we were able to get out of these next couple of matches 12 points or 13 points, that's an incredible return. And I think you start really looking at the remainder of the season and start thinking, okay, we've got a chance now. I mean, we're going to have tougher matches coming up. It's not going to be easy even after this one. But you got to do everything you can to put yourself in that position. And I think we just have to look at these next few matches and hopefully some of the players we brought in, I think they strengthen our side. Hopefully they give us a chance to maybe add a little bit of dynamism and a little bit of difference to our play. Because I think that's another thing where we've struggled a little bit is.
But before you get to that, wait, we still have to talk about the transfer market.
That's what I'm trying to say. I'm trying to give you that lead in.
I know, but wait, I still have to close up the first sort of quote unquote half with what happened on match day 22. So we know about Genoa. We know about Genoa and Pisa 0-0.
That's fine.
But what else happened there? So we had the match day 22 starting with Cagliari Spal, which, by the way, we'll talk about what happened with Spal on the transfer market. But Cagliari Spal, so we know about Ranieri that joined the Cagliari side, and it actually ended up with a nice 2-1 against Spal. It was a very battled match. Started with a 1-0 for Cagliari, but then Spal actually did tie within the first half. Then obviously La Padula God forbid on him still scoring. I don't even know how, but anyways, in the second half with also red card on.
I kind of love it when he still shows up. I'm not gonna.
Yeah. Anyways, it ends up 2-1 for Cagliari with a red card right at the 90th plus 6 minutes on the spot side.
Yeah.
Then Venezia Cittadella, as we mentioned on the last podcast, there was this huge clash against the two of them where there was some wrongdoing, perhaps maybe based on the playouts of 2 years ago and whatnot. Ended up actually 1-1. This was at Venezia side, so at the Pico. So we had a penalty starting with on the Venezia side. So our I'm not going to chop it, but the Gianpaolo,
Yep.
He scored on a penalty, and actually only 10 minutes later, it's funny because I remember Jake from Città Calcio again. I'm mentioning him like thousands of times today, but nevertheless, he was the one that he actually mentioned to me coming in this match because of whatever in the past and so on. However, our two biggest goal scorers on both sides are, again, I'm going to chop it again, but Pohan Gianpaolo and Antonucci. And in fact, 2 penalties, one from Pohan Gianpaolo and the other one from Antonucci. Amazing. It was almost like predicting the match that was coming up. So ends 1-1. Then we have Ternana Modena. Ternana waking up. So careful there. 2-1 against Modena.
Definitely agree with that one.
Südtirol, our superheroes, yet we still have to be careful because we still have to face them. But nevertheless, they win 2-1 against super hyper Regina. They started with a 1-1. Then they tie about 5 minutes later. First half ends. A red card on this I have to say it. A red card on the Südtirol side. Yet 10 minutes later, Südtirol scores and wins the match. I love it. I'm sorry for Regina, but nevertheless, it was something that needs to be said.
Massive result. And how could you not be excited about something like that?
Exactly. Next opponents, Parma. So our Parma that is coming to we're going to be facing them at Parma, basically, against our friends at Cosenza. So our Raffaello, no? Yeah. So at the 4th minute, I was watching actually that match, and on the 4th minute, I'm like, oh God, this guy Florenzi, he scores at the 4th minute. I'm sorry for Cosenza, but based on their track record, are they going to make it? Are they going to hold it? They can't make it because look at Parma. Look at the potential that, the players and, everything. It ends 1-0. So they were able to hold that 1-0 lead that they had at the 4th minute. Amazing. Kudos. Going back to our conversation from the beginning, where the bottom 3, are bottom 3, bottom 5, bottom 6, whatever you want, are like so close to mid-table, essentially. Or to Raffaello's point, maybe at the end of the league, even fight for playoffs.
Yeah.
Then we have
Südtirol in 4th position right now is something remarkable. I think you have to just say.
From this team that started to be like the mattress of Serie B to the point of everybody's going to get 3 points from them, of being 4th, from this team that has never been to Serie B, fairly, barely kind of like been created because they were like a joint venture between Bolzano and so on. Nevertheless, 4th spot. Oh, it like that region, Trentino, has never had like any major team. Trento has done Triestina. Trento has never done anything. Triestina, Friuli. But Trento has never really done anything, even though it was the most known between the two, because there's only 2 provinces in Trentino. And the other one is Bolzano. So Bolzano has never done anything, but then they joined with Südtirol, and look at them now. From a 3rd, 4th division, now they're in 2nd division, Serie B, and now 4th spot.
Picking above their weight. By the way, did I have this completely wrong? I thought there was a Genoa club, Bolzano, but maybe that was...
There is.
There is. Okay.
Beautiful city. Whomever's listening, obviously you have to go to Genoa. There's no question about that. But Bolzano is a beautiful city, beautiful, especially when you go around the Christmas side. The Christmas markets and
Christmas
so on.
market stuff.
It's just Bolzano as itself is a very small town, but beautiful. Well, it's you can almost eat off the floor for how pretty and so well protected it is. And around Christmas, it's just beautiful.
Love it.
Next, Brescia Como. So we were expecting this Brescia to explode and whatnot from our Bianchi, former captain from the Primavera side. And we saw them from last match, sort of like a hiccup and whatnot. And actually at the end of the first half, they had a red card, which kind of penalized them. But, that happens. In fact, in the second half, 15 minutes in, Bazzelli from Como scores the 1-0, which brought actually a second, just a few seconds before the end of the match, of another red card from Brescia. So they ended up the match in 9 and ended 1-0 for Como at Brescia. That's incredible too. Anyways.
Yeah.
So next one up, we have, I lost the track here. Bari Perugia. So that's another team that our Raffaello was talking about, the fact of them being fighting for the third spot. So it's at Bari. They were like almost, remember our former guest 2 or 3 episodes ago from Bari, the British guy that was telling it was fair for Genoa to win. Perugia winning at Bari 2-0. What happened there?
Massive result.
75th minute and 81st minute from Serio a doppietta, as we say in Italian. 2 goals. What happened there? What's going on with Bari? Even though we will get to the transfer market, not we have to say too much about Bari, but they have, as many other have done, a lot of changes in the January transfer window. But they lost.
Yeah.
Next one obviously was Genoa Pisa, which ended in a 0-0. Ascoli Palermo. That was another odd one. Again, Ascoli, super difficult. And I'm not saying because Ascoli is supposed to be like in the top 5. They might not want to hear what I just said. But essentially, it's a very tough, stadium to go there and make points. Palermo actually did it, winning 2-1. So away from home on the road, started with their goal. Then there was a tie after the break. There was a penalty miss on the Palermo side, and just that, I love this. After penalty that you miss, usually there's a way of saying it in Italian. They say gol mancato, gol subito, which means goal that you missed, then goal that you're gonna get. Right. But not even 10 minutes later, after the penalty they missed, they actually scored and win 2-1. So 2-1 at Ascoli, amazing for them. Last but not least, I'd rather not talk about this one. Frosinone Benevento. Damn you, Benevento! You're supposed to do it.
Man,
awful match. That's what I heard about everybody. But to your point, everybody's gonna. We talked about this before the recording. Everybody's gonna talk badly about who wins and whatnot and so on. Frosinone was at home. They won 1-0 against Benevento. Quite a few yellow cards. They only got a penalty at the 81st minute.
That's exactly right.
Matt, that should have ended 0-0.
At the 81st minute. I mean, it was such a close match to being. And imagine, again, if they drop 2 points, that's a really big thing for us. And so you see another win for them. They keep on moving, but it just feels like, I don't know. I'm going to keep my mouth shut on this one, but we'll see what happens in the second half of the season.
I want Rafa to be the god on the predictions.
What did he say? It's, the football is round. It can go forward. Sometimes it can come back and hit you. That's
Yeah,
that phrase.
in differently, sort of, but essentially in Italian is like la palla rotonda e può andare in qualunque rete, meaning the ball is round and it can go in any goal.
Yeah. Okay. There we go.
But more or less is what you were trying to say.
Yes.
So having said that, transfer market.
Transfer market. So Genoa finally, I think when you're talking to Genoa fans like us, and when you watch the match against Pisa and a couple of the other recent games, I think if you were to say what are the specific areas of need that we have, we need more forwards. The last several matches, I think, especially with Ekuban hurt, which by the way, exciting to see him back in training and back wearing a Genoa shirt, even if it's not on an actual match. But how many matches were we looking at when it was Puskás, Koda, and Yelchin as the three available forwards, and perhaps you put Aramu in there, but I still think of Aramu as more of like a midfielder. So we needed a striker, we needed a forward, and I think it was no secret at all. We needed a left back. We needed some sort of cover. We've been deploying Sibora to some effect, but maybe not to great effect. Of course, we signed Mimo. But Mimo is also aging. We can't expect him to be that person. And even maybe having Sabelli back on the left, I just kind of think we need somebody else. And so,
mind you, wait, like
yeah.
the Criscito side is very important because we have that quality. There's like Criscito is like that guy that is Serie A material, whether he's old or not. He's like even like Bonucci, like people don't want him, but yet he still has that.
He still has the quality. Yeah, of course he does. Yeah, I mean, he's one of those guys, but it's a good thing, So in the transfer window, though, I think we addressed several positions in those ones in particular. So we saw, I think, on the left back side specifically, Haps we ended up signing from Venezia, which I think was a really big get. We're not going to be able to use him, unfortunately, for a few matches because of a red card he picked up just before we had signed him. But he's a guy that, as much as I understand, he offers some pace. He definitely offers an option on the left side. And it's if anything else, we need depth. Don't forget, Payac isn't completely out for the entire season, but again, we need that rotation that's there. We need a guy who can play right now. I guess Haps isn't exactly that guy because he can't play within the next 2 or 3 matches, but he's definitely a player that offers depth to our squad and offers a little bit of a difference also from a Mimo. I think a little bit more of a pacey player too. Probably more exciting for Genoa fans. We had 2 signings in the forward position. One player made his debut actually in the match of the weekend against Pisa. So we saw Denis Dragus, another Romanian player, come into the side, a player we had signed from Standard Liège. I think we maybe talked about him a little bit in the last podcast. Didn't really get a great look at him so far, but it was exciting to see him already get his first match in after being signed last week, and I'm excited to see what he does going forward. We talked a lot about the double Dragus or the double dragon with Dragushin and Dragus, and of course we got Puskás too, so we got a little Romanian triplet in our squad. But I'm excited about him, and hopefully excited. Maybe this feels a little bit like we're taking advantage of the system a bit, but for me, this is the first real 777 multiple team ownership benefactor thing that we're going to be able to see. So I'm curious to see how Dragus works out for us.
Actually, it's interesting that you say that because a lot of people are talking, obviously, Genovese, Mugugno, all that sort of thing is one. And they're talking about this negative aspect with respect to the fact of missing out on the midfield because they're mostly are talking about the fact of not having had this regista, which is a little bit of an older style with respect to type of an approach of a formation and whatnot.
Sure.
Especially on the outbound, we saw Galdames being sent out, right? So they're saying, well, you're sending out Galdames, but you're not getting anyone else, which we were looking forwards with someone with respect to the midfield.
People are really complaining about Galdames going out. How many games has this guy played in all season? Like 2?
No, but it's not only that. It's except one game that we did fairly well. I'm not going to say exceptionally well.
No, he played. Yeah, I remember that one. He played okay.
yeah, they only complain about him, but nevertheless,
Right.
Salcido,
Right. This the only time this guy comes in is like Galdamish, Fanculo, like, and now all of a sudden we're pissed off because look, at least again he's playing for Cremonese, secret agent Galdamish trying to get above Sampdoria. Come on, let's go.
Bala wanted him. Bala wanted him.
I love that. But I don't really fully understand the thing. Like for me, we have players that have potential creatively. I put Jagiello in that position. I know not everybody does. Goodmanson, of course, is in that role.
Frandrup and Albert Goodmanson were the two that were definitely not to be touched.
Yeah,
Hefty, a lot of people saw him already out the door, and I don't think he will be. I'm sorry to see him. Your point, he did a little bit, like a lot of people like boshed him on the match, but still,
I don't think
he's better than before.
Yeah, I didn't see that personally. I thought that, but it wasn't a especially memorable match, but I thought that he did fine. And to your point, we're going to need him. We need that rotational depth with as much as we're going to be relying on players. And already there have been a couple of times Sabelli has been banned from playing, so obviously we need Hefty to step into that position.
Two different type of qualities. Sabelli does a little bit more in the. I don't know. We still, as your point is like that rotation between the two players, just because of freshness, just because of whatever, right?
Sure.
On the left side, we do see Payas. Will he ever coming back? Probably towards the end, but whomever has, especially that type of injury and whatnot, when they do come back, they're not at all close to what they were before injury.
That's why that Hap signing, I think, is going to be very important.
Absolutely.
Even if he is the stopgap between now and Payas, I think you can't bank on that being the case necessarily, that he's going to come back in and be where he was. But I think another player that we signed, obviously, our last signing of the window, and really a return for a former youth player in Eddie Salcedo.
Eddie, it was so funny with Eddie, like our former guest. He's like, I thought it was about me. I'm like, no, wait. Eddie Salcedo is like, welcome back. For you, it's just welcome. Right. It's not only a just, it's like an imperative welcome. Yeah. But no, Eddie Salcedo coming from our youth, actually all the way from the bottom up to the point of being sold to Inter for over 10, 15 million. I can't remember, from the Preziosi era, mind you. In fact, he is
not that long ago. I think 2019 we sold him, maybe.
Exactly, like only like 3 years ago, 3-4 years ago. But nevertheless, he's on a loan with a right to buy. He is in his prime. I think he's like what, 20.
He's still so young. He's 21 years old.
21 years old. That's right. So from a forward / whatever role he can cover, I can't remember, but he's like at his early prime. He didn't explode yet, but he's still young, guys. Like I remember when even Borriello came and he was like in his mid-20s. He's like 23, 24. And they were like saying, oh my God, this guy from Milan, AC Milan, he's not doing that well and so on. And he came to Genoa with obviously Gasparini, but nevertheless, he did this explosion. And I still think that Salcedo might have that, that potential and whatnot. But nevertheless, he came with the transfer market. Heps was another great addition to the left back. What else did we have there, Matt?
Those guys were the big guys. I mean, we haven't really talked a ton about Maturo, who hasn't really featured for us yet.
Once.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, he did.
Few minutes,
a little bit
at the end.
The defensive kind of player, defensive cover there. But I mean, I think just going back to Salcedo for a second too. I mean, this one for me is, I think, the crown jewel of the transfer window for us. We not only returned to getting a young homegrown player with potential, which I think we kind of, when we also saw Yeboah going the other way to play for Augsburg and in the Bundesliga, we needed something else there. We needed a little bit, maybe more of a player in that type of profile as well. And
You're right.
That. But maybe even more importantly than anything else, and I understand that he wasn't exactly always a player in the first 11, but this is a guy that this season was playing straight at Bari, a direct competitor of ours.
I was going to say the same thing, exactly. Like he was at Bari. he played what?
I don't know
6 months?
Yeah, about 6 months. So just
The first 6 months, right?
Yes, and he scored as recently as 2 weeks ago against Parma. They absolutely thrashed Parma.
So
Great positioning.
This goal can only give us hopes for the guy, the kid, the youngster to explode, right?
Well, look, we just need that rotational option at least. I don't think we need Salcedo to be our starting forward necessarily. But to have a player that can do that can come off the bench, I think is going to be very, very important for us in the second half. So
it's the Yeboah that we didn't have.
Exactly. And then, by the way, let's just cross our fingers about Ekuban, because if we have him coming back in as well, I think it really strengthens us in a major.
I'm keeping fingers crossed because everybody not necessarily loved him, yet they wanted him, yet they despised him, yet they love him. It's like a love and hate relationship with Ekuban. But I'm guessing eventually by April, I'm gonna put a month there, but April, May is the end of the season. By April, we're gonna have to see him back. Nevertheless, transfer market, what would you give to Genoa?
I would give them a B. I don't think we have any absolute, oh my God, this is a different team now signings. But I do think that again, of all the positions, perhaps some fans wanted to see a proper number 10 or something. I don't know. But I think really we needed forwards and we needed a left back. And also, we've not really seen Maturo, but I think he could be an interesting signing as well. And so, a little bit disappointed to not get a player of Kevin Lasagna's quality. That was an amazing rumor. That seemed like a completely almost unfair trade.
Let me give you a little bit of insight on that one. That's true. Right. You're right. Was the expectations on Lasagna super high from the Genoa fan side? No, because essentially on the forward side, we're okay. And especially with Salcedo, if he does well, do we really need Lasagna? No. Nevertheless, what happened with Lasagna? So Lasagna was actually something that was offered, quote unquote, by Verona in order to get Semper.
Which is crazy to me.
It was an exchange. I don't know if it was at par. Perhaps there could have been some different evaluation and whatnot. But right at the last minute, mind you, Verona are arch nemesis because they're super friends with the bikers. But it's nothing to do with that, obviously, on the club level. Nevertheless, at the last minute, the club has increased the value of Lasagna and decreased the actual value of Semper. So Genoa said, you know what?
Fuck you.
Exactly. I was going to say sayonara, but I like that better.
I think that's the way. Look, I sort of understand what they're doing because I don't know how. It's not that I don't rate Semper. I just feel like Lasagna, even in his older age, is a guy that he's not a Serie B player. So for us to get him, but beyond that, we got depth. I think we did not completely change over the squad. There were so many gripes about having however many signings we had last winter, which obviously some of them came good, like Goodmanson. But I think it was the right amount of balance to add. We're not looking at a new club identity all of a sudden. We're not playing a different style.
Listen, the only
that's what we want.
The only soft ask that Gilardino has asked to the team, to the club, was actually someone to replace Yeboah. So,
and we got there with Salcedo,
and we did.
Absolutely, that's exactly Salcedo's that specific signing. Dragush, I don't think is that type of player. I think Dragush is a little bit more of a, I don't know, it's a different type of forward than Yeboah was, from what I can tell. Again, I've only seen him in bits and pieces in some Belgian league highlights and stuff, but we have Salcedo, and then I think again Dragush could be a really interesting player for us. He could be maybe an Eldor type player in a few years.
Right?
A decent return on him too. So we'll see.
So having said that, next match day, so it's match day 23.
Yes.
It's going to be within a few days. We're recording right now on Wednesday, February 1st. Tomorrow's action. I hate that day in the way it's like Groundhog Day. But nevertheless, the next match day is going to start actually on Friday. We're going to have Modena Cagliari. I'm curious to see Modena Cagliari, what's going to turn out of that one, especially with this Ranieri side that is going to Rafa, our Cosenza guy, point to see what happens. Benevento, Venezia again. Venezia, from what we saw, what we have seen, they should not be down there. So I want to see them to win against Benevento because that's what I want to see. Otherwise, what the hell are you showing yourself in against us with this type of formation?
Right.
Cittadella Ascoli. Oh, that's a huge fight. Talking with Jake, essentially, listen to this. This is insane. The president of Ascoli has blocked Jake, Cheetah Culture USA, on Instagram. Like
what?
Exactly. The president? Like seriously?
I love
like,
that.
What's the matter with you?
That's a proper Calcio rivalry right there. We'll be watching that one for sure.
Anyways, and then after that, Cosenza Ternana. That's going to be an ugly one, but I definitely do want to see Cosenza turn out with some points out of that one. Perugia Brescia. Brescia on a downfall, Perugia on an upside. Like,
it's a pretty remarkable run of form for both of those sides. Brescia have not won their last 5, and Perugia have managed 3 after I think maybe not winning. They've only won 6 all season, so half of their wins have come in the last 5 matches. That's pretty remarkable.
Yeah, but let's don't mention the one from Genoa because that's not worthless. It's worthless, actually.
I was trying to block that memory out, and you just brought it back.
Sorry, Matt. And then what do we have? We have Pisa Südtirol. That's going to be an interesting match. I would say that was one of the interesting one of match day 23.
Oh, absolutely it is. Pisa needed something out of that match. They need more than a draw, I think. I mean, I guess, perhaps, but, you're looking at Ternana playing a side, playing Cittadella, you mentioned, I think. You expect Ternana to win in the form that they're in. Or no, sorry, Ascoli's playing Cittadella. Who's Ternana playing? They're playing Benevento?
Ternana is playing Cosenza.
Cosenza.
At Cosenza.
Thank you. Okay. So you would think that Pisa need to get points out of this one. So I think it's going to be an interesting battle between these two sides.
Absolutely. And then, so after we have talked about Perugia Brescia, Pisa Südtirol, and then Spal Bari. So we talked briefly, just a little bit of a transfer market. There is one player that we did not mention about the transfer market. So that is Mr.
Raja Nainggolan.
Nainggolan is actually coming to Serie B. So have I said this? I wanted to say, like, Serie A has been like this all. We're in Serie B, so we're seeing it from a Serie B's perspective. But from a Serie A perspective, when you see world champions from the Serie A, from the Italians' perspective, so you see Gilardino, you see Cannavaro, you see De Rossi, and so on, and then you see certain players like like now Nainggolan, then you see Strootman, Badel, and so on. Players coming to Serie B or being in Serie B. I wonder from the outside, what are they seeing? Are they like still downsizing Serie B as like the useless, who cares about league?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, there's some conversation. I mean, obviously there's, not to completely play on it, but you've got Fabregas and Como too, which is like, what? But I think there's an intrigue to the league. I'm not sure Nainggolan is here because of that intrigue. Specifically, obviously, he's at the end of his career, and I think we've seen a fair number of players in that part of their career. I mean, you can look at Palacio up until this past season, was playing in Serie B for actually many years.
Wait. Palacio has gone to basketball. What is
no,
he?
It's a basketball. No, it's not a pro basketball. Well, actually, a pro basketball player in Serie D, I think. Yeah.
I still would want him to Genoa right now, but okay.
Me too. Rat tail and all. But I think that there's a competitiveness. There's an interesting element with what's going on because you've got a job to do, and I think there's still a decent amount of prestige with the teams that are in the league. You've got a decent amount of fanfare as well, where you've got maybe Spal isn't as notable for some of this, but I think they do a decent job themselves. And as you mentioned, I mean, how many? Isn't it like 5 or 6 World Cup champions are managing in Serie B right now?
Yeah,
it's kind of an amazing number.
It's 5 plus. We said him before
No, he wasn't a World Cup champion. I just thought you were talking about like a prestigious manager.
No. De Rossi, Grosso,
yeah.
Gilardino, and one more, and Inzaghi.
Yeah.
4. Plus, you get the goalie from Parma, Buffon. I thought there was one more, but to your point.
But anyway, I think it's an interesting league. You see a lot. There were every team. It seemed like if you look at like the transfer, sometimes we look at that transfer market site. If you go by like the incomings of the winter transfer market for Serie B, every team was active. You know, it wasn't like even the craziness that you saw in the Premier League, like the bottom teams, like a team like Everton. I'm not sure they signed really anyone. Just about every single side had 3 or 4 incomings going on in Serie B, and maybe there aren't that many notable names outside of Nainggolan. But at the same, you have Mauro Zarate, who had formerly played for Lazio, signing for Cosenza. So there were a couple of like former big names coming back to the league. But I just think that the amount of activity full stop is kind of what I think is kind of compelling, and it makes it for, again, part of that narrative for the second half of the season where you don't really know what's going to happen. So,
and I still want to emphasize the fact of Serie B, how it is so underrated, not only Italian-wise, because you get the media that is only going to focus on the top 5, top 6 type of the big sisters. But also from internationally speaking, they only speak about Serie A and they never speak about Serie B, which internationally I can also accept that. But from an Italian perspective, when you look at the big 3 papers, the sports newspaper, and they have like 95% of their coverage on Serie A, and not only 95% of Serie A, is like probably 85% on the top 5 squads, and like 5% on the remainder, and like 2%, 3%, or whatever that percentage I've talked about on Serie B, and the rest, because there's also Serie C and whatnot. It's like, F you. Like, really, you are the media, and you are supposed to be the ones that are promoting Italian calcio. Italian calcio, especially based on the fact that Serie A has not been showing too much of talent from Italian side, hence the Italian not being qualified for 2 years. Sorry, two World Cups. Okay.
Well, obviously there's like a much bigger thing going on here, and I agree with you. Like, this is a league that like needs more attention because it's a proper league. Like, you see it all around, and we talked about it earlier in the podcast. Like, you look at Serie A, and it is not an equal league. You have the top teams who are far and away. You've got a couple of teams that have an ability to come in and out depending on if they're smart with their resources and bringing the right managers and what have you. And then you've got probably 4 or 5 or 6 teams at the bottom of that table that just are never going to be competitive with the rest of the league. And it makes for a very imbalanced fixture set because you've got, the big clashes with the famous, what do you call it? The six sisters.
Sisters.
Yeah.
6, 7 sisters, depending on the years.
So you have those big games, and people hype it up. And we had one this past weekend a little bit with Napoli and Roma, which lived up to its billing.
But sorry for interrupting, but look at what Cremonese is doing. Nobody's going to talk too much about Cremonese, about their big experience and their big, upsetting Napoli and now having upset Roma. It's like a 2-liner because of Coppa Italia, which nobody cares because they made it that nobody cares. And then it's gone.
It's a general trend, I think, that is a bummer across football, honestly. There's
Calcio or football in general?
I think football in general. I mean, I think there's a culture point. I mean, but I guess I want to return back to your point though about I guess more about calcio and about perhaps the Italian game suffering. I mean, I think like looking at what we're seeing in Serie B, I'm more on the positive side of this than the negative side. And I think what you need to see maybe more are some of those younger players, and perhaps this transfer window and some of the other examples isn't a great example of that because we're talking just now about several older players. But I think the quality of football obviously in this league is very good. And we've not seen a ton of time from players like Lipani and others who have made our bench recently and are in our Primavera. We talked about the Primavera for a second, I believe. But the hope is if you have that attention, if you bring those things in, and what I think you are seeing, which is, I don't want to say it's unusual, but I think it's pretty positive, is there's a decent amount of fanfare still in Serie B. Obviously, like we're up in Serie A, our attendance gate goes up. Every team's attendance gate goes up because you're playing against teams like Juventus or Milan every other weekend, and that has more interest naturally just because it does. But this is a league that's competitive. You have a pretty good amount of skill sets. It's not some, just a bunch of brutes slugging the ball up onto the other side, playing old school, like just huff it up to the forward type of a game. And I think like you have an opportunity for that young talent to grow and to really experience what it's like to play in Italian football. And we've talked a lot about promotional issues of getting the league in front of other people and celebrating it more, almost in a similar way that the championship is celebrated and understood by some as one of the most competitive and difficult leagues in the world. Like Serie B really should be thought of in a similar way because you just look top to bottom and all of these teams can take points off of one another. And each of them have competitive players. I mean, how many players did we list off of from Venezia's squad who are good? And by the way, they got rid of a bunch of other ones that have since left in the transfer window, and they still have a bunch of competitive players.
I honestly want to get in touch with Marco from our previous podcast, but just to understand, like I've seen like a whole bunch of players from Venezia to go.
Yeah, I don't understand that part at all. But I think the point being is that there's talent in this league. I think there's opportunity for young Italian players to grow in this league. I think it needs to be celebrated and promoted in a way that people look at it that way and see it as that type of an opportunity. But it does seem like, for lack of a better word, foundationally, there's enough there to have you feeling like this could be a positive thing in the long run.
Let's hope so. I still do think. Remember, like from the early days, from the beginning of the season of Serie B, that we, specifically me, have complained about Serie B league with respect to not promoting themselves well enough, to the fact that in Canada we do not have a representation. You guys have Helbiz, which is the scooter type of company, Italian company, whatnot. Nevertheless, like in Serie B overall, in general, it's not like well promoted, has ever been promoted, whatnot. Anyways, going back to match day 23, the next one coming up after Spalbari, which we're expecting Bari to come up a little bit with a great transfer market, Spal having Nangolan coming added to them. Then we have Como Frosinone. Como has coming out from a decent spell. They have had like 3 wins, 1 loss, and 2 draws, to be facing Frosinone, which is the one that we want them to stop because their form is not that bad, as we know, except the loss against us. After our loss, they have had only 4 wins, only, quote unquote, only. And before that, you can only imagine how many. But nevertheless, we want someone to start to stop somehow, whether with a tie or with a win against Frosinone. And to Raffaello's point from Cosenza Club New York, is, in his opinion, like the second part of the leg is going to be a little bit different. Palermo Regina that's one of our next opponents against Regina, which we want them to be sitting a little bit more on the bench a little bit. And so Palermo at home against Regina, It's a little bit of a derby, not really, because it's Calabria against Sicilia, but nevertheless they're very close, and it's sort of like some sort of like a derby from the south.
Yeah.
So that'll be the second probably best match that I can foresee from match day 23. Obviously, now next we have our match of Parma Genoa. So what do you think about our next match against Parma?
Well, like obviously we had a very strange game against them at home, and ended up leaving.
Oh, I remember that match.
3-3 draw.
3-3.
And you
With
had
those two
weird,
goals.
yeah, a couple of very weird Parma goals, and it was generally like a weird match. I mean, obviously, like I think at that point we were already talking about how our home form had not been great, and there was kind of some concern about it maybe going the wrong way or whatever. But this is a game that is always going to be difficult. Parma are a side that have a lot of quality. We're playing away from home. They've not been on the best run of form. They've won once in their last 5 matches. But I don't think there's anything from this side that we can look at.
That was at home.
Yeah. Right. And so we can't take this type of a game at all for granted. And we need to make sure that we're getting a really positive result out of this, because this is a side that always has a potential to get 3 points, even though they've not maybe done that so much regularly. I think when you look at their team, maybe you would think more immediately about a player like Vasquez, who has maybe had a little bit less of a great run most recently, and perhaps Bernabe is another player to kind of be somewhat concerned about, both kind of midfield type of players. We're familiar with Anin Juric and some other guys that have played for them. But I think this is going to be a tough game. I think this is another one that we may see again, another hard-fought match. I think this one, it's another one that for me kind of has another draw written all over it. This is a team, though, that has conceded more, which I think plays in our favor. Although most recently against Cosenza, of course, they only let in that 1 goal. We talked about them conceding 4 against Bari, which was kind of pretty remarkable, to be honest with you.
Last goal.
Yeah. They did let in 2 against Venezia. So there's potential, for this to be a little bit more of an open game. I think it might be a little bit more of a difficult one for us. I'm thinking it could end a little bit more along the lines of a 1-1. I do think Genoa are going to be on the front foot for this one, and I kind of expect us to maybe get a little bit more of a positive result than that. But I just think when you're playing away at a side like Parma, you mentioned before, the fan welcome. I don't think there's really an animosity between Genoa fans and Parma fans, other than
there is.
There's a major gemellagio, I think, between Parma and Sampdoria as well, isn't there?
The bikers, yeah.
Yeah. So it's one where I think you're going to be walking into an environment where it's hostile. Maybe is not exactly the right word. Maybe you think it is, but I think it's going to be one where it's going to be an intimidating game for our players to play. I don't think. What do you think?
I don't know. From a player's perspective, I don't think there's.
I mean, it probably doesn't matter, but I just think it adds a little bit to the whole thing. If Parma get going, I expect that this is going to be a game where you're going to see the Parma fans turning up. Is my point, and so I think it's a difficult match. I think it will likely end in a draw. Myself is kind of what I see happening. I believe
0-0.
I think it'll be 1-1. I think we have the quality to win this match. I still am good as a fan. I'm going to be watching it, expecting us to go out and to get 3 points. I think we need to do that to continue to kind of solidify our place. But it's one that for me feels a little bit nervous, because we are playing away, and I don't care about their form. This is a side that we were always kind of looking over our shoulder and saying they have an ability to kind of pip us for that spot. And while we've got a decent distance between us and them right now, you can't discount them, I don't think.
So 1-1.
I
Who's the
think
goal
so.
scorer?
I think so. I think for us, the goal scorer, We talked about our predictions last time. Maybe Goodmanson gets on the score sheet. I don't know. I think we see Dragush on the score sheet for us this time. A late substitute goal.
Dragon number 2.
Dragon number 2. I think that could happen. I think we might see that. I think.
Okay.
But we'll see. It's one where we have more than a fighting chance to win this game. Don't get me wrong. I'm not pessimistic about our opportunities here. I just think that it'll be a difficult match to win.
So from my perspective, I see Genoa on the road this year, for whatever the reason is doing a lot better on the road compared to at home.
That's true.
At home, we get these Barcelona, Real Madrid, whatever, Aston Villa, whatever you want to call them, and so on, coming to the Marassi and showing their remarks and their qualities that they do not remark again, underline and bold, do not show during the league. Nevertheless, on the road, you're showing perhaps maybe a little bit of more relaxation, maybe not too concentrated because they're not at the Ferraris. So it's like the Serie A type of stadium that they're not used to or whatnot, depending on the team, on their history and their background, especially depending also on their players, because they want to show themselves, because it's the match against the lead of the league and whatnot. Lead meaning not because it's the first of the league, but lead because it's we always say the same thing anyways. Nevertheless, I do see Parma Genoa compared to Genoa Parma a huge difference. Parma, when they came over to Genoa, they did have a lot of luck on their side.
They did.
Whether they want to admit that or not, it's super obvious. Nevertheless, that's like several months ago. After also a January transfer market, which Parma had also reinforced their squad and whatnot. We do see a form of Parma that is not the best on their side.
Yeah,
we do see from last to older whatnot, one loss, a win, a loss, and another draw. So in the last 5 matches, they only caught 4 points. And out of these ones, we're talking about that win at home again that you mentioned against Perugia, out of all. But they lost just last one against Cosenza, with nothing against Cosenza, but nevertheless they lost at Cosenza 1-0, which if it's the Parma that they were supposed to be, they're supposed to be a little bit higher than the 10th spot.
Right.
Having said that, Genoa on the road is showing a lot better. They are on the 2nd spot. They are hungry for points. They have drawn against Pisa. They need more points. They were expecting 4 points between the match against Pisa and Parma, perhaps on the opposite side. But nevertheless, I'm expecting a win away. So on the Parma side, on the Parma field, and I do see a 2-0 actually. After a 3-3 draw at home, I want to see a 2-0. I don't know why I'm saying that, but I see a 2-0.
I can see it. I mean, I think there's reason for that. I mean, who would be your goal scorers in that case?
That's a good question. After people complaining about Coda being reborn, and down the last match, he was like sleeping or whatnot, I think away he has a lot more chances. I didn't look at the stats of Coda away from home, but I think away from home he's going to make the 1 score and the 2nd score. Even though I've been going with the defense and so on, this time around I'm going to see Goodmanson doing the 2nd score. So we're not going to see anyone major new signing or whatnot.
Our usual suspects,
Coda and Goodmanson.
So I think I sometimes highlight this. It's a little interesting on the betting side. Or the American sports books are usually a little bit slow in the uptake with European football, and in particular Serie B. But according to BetMGM, the odds here between the teams in for a draw are really, really close, actually. So Genoa are plus 180, compared to Parma's plus 160 for the teams to win outright, and it's a plus 220 bet for it to be a draw. So
it's high for the tie.
Yeah, so it's pretty even across the board. There's one statistic that I thought was kind of interesting. Every now and then they'll do a breakdown of how a team does when their odds are the way that they are. So Genoa at plus 180, the expected kind of win rate at that amount is about 36% of the time you get a win. According to BetMGM, Genoa win 1% of the matches they have at these odds. I think that's completely inflated because of our Serie A performances, perhaps in recent seasons. But it is a sort of an interesting statistic to see because it's so far off of it. Parma are at about a 38% chance to win at plus 160.
So what's the site so I can start to bet on some money?
If you if you can use your VPN magic and trick places to think you're in New Jersey, I can send you a whole bunch of them. But BetMGM is a sports book that's giving this line, and yeah, I guess it is slightly favoring Parma actually in the tie, just only by a tiny amount. So it
could be. I'm saying 2-0, but it could obviously all games. As we talked about the beginning where the ball is round, all games can go either way, right?
Yes.
But ultimately, I think Genoa needs the win, not that Parma does not. So I'm saying 2-0, but ultimately, I want it to have like a final 2-0, but ultimately, it can even be a 1-0, 1-1, 0-0, 1-0 for the other side, and 1-0. Definitely. I remember I was listening to the pod actually that you the comment that you had on the last pod where you were saying, I'm afraid about the form of Genoa. I'll be going on the positive side, and I don't see them winning again. And we were talking about against Pisa, right? And essentially that's what happened with against the 0-0. So going to against or pro all the Italians that don't want to talk about predictions. You kind of like got that on top with respect to the fact of predicting the fact of so many wins and it has to stop, and that's what I'm hoping that is going to happen against Frosinone, but it's still not happening. I don't know why. Nevertheless,
yeah. Oh, sorry. No. I see exactly against Frosinone. Yes, right. Yeah.
I still do think that we have a chance against Parma. Nevertheless, Parma is not the weakest side. So I did say 2-0 because I want to see finally like a good, nice win, especially after that odd tie. The only time we conceded more than one goal, or more or less, nevertheless. But yeah, I think that Parma are going to be showing that their side is not worth the 10 spot because it's against us. But I don't know, for them to be promoted to the Serie A this year, it's going to be tough. Yeah. Contrary to what Raffaello was saying.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. I think it'll be another enthralling match for both supporters and even for the neutral fans. So let's hope we get a positive result out of it, and then we'll keep on keeping on.
So having said that, so you're calling more for a tie. I'm calling more for a win. So hopefully it's going to be one between the 1 point and 2 pointers, 3 pointers. Unfortunately, we can't get 2 points.
Like a hockey overtime win or something.
Well, in the olden days, the wins were 2 points, but
yeah.
Nevertheless, this is important for us in the next match. We want to see continuously to see Gilardino to make his stance. And I still do think that he is a genius at what he's doing, and he still has to show us what his abilities are. Nevertheless, we are at a wrap.
That's it.
And we have to say that it was an amazing I think match day 22 bringing us to match 23. It's going to be very weird, especially after that message I got from Raffaello. It's making my mind like going crazy with respect to the second leg, with respect to Serie B. And all we have to say is you can still continuously follow us on social media, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. Drop us any comments, write us any DMs and whatnot. You can always reach out to us also to be joining our Genoa. It's a chat that we have created on WhatsApp. So reach out to us if you wanted to join this English chat that we have. And as always, we never will be tired to say,
Forza Genoa.
Forza Genoa. You've listened to La Lanterna, a spotlight on Italian football, a podcast powered by Genoani Si Resta. Thank you for listening and see you next week.